Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. I'd like to welcome you all to our conducting a virtual focus group to gather user feedback webinar. Today, Pharmica consultant Kristen Patterson is going to walk us through a presentation and field any questions you all have. But please feel free to use the GoToMeeting interface to ask questions at any time during the presentation, and we'll hold a Q&A session when we're all wrapped up. So with that, I will turn it over to Kristen.
Thanks, Billy. Welcome, everyone. It's great to see some old familiar faces and some new faces as well. Today, I'm going to be talking about conducting a virtual focus group to gather user feedback. So a little bit about Pharmica. Pharmica has been around for over 10 years, and we provide pain relief to the biopharma industry. Our consultants have industry experience and can bring a lot of clarity to your problems and solutions to them. You can learn more about Pharmica at pharmicaconsulting.com, and I think Billy will give you that information at the end again. My name's Kristen Patterson. I've been with Pharmica since 2012, and my experience is largely in large pharma IT organizations, both in customer-facing roles such as a help desk analyst and roles that support the business like a business analyst, IT communications analyst, where we did a lot of communications about technology changes. And most recently, I've been working in organizational change management in an Office 365 migration capacity. In all of the roles that I've had, I've really helped people adapt to changing technology, and this is something that I like to do, and it's really become my personal mission to continue to help people to adapt to the technology and make their work life easier so that they can get to the science. And speaking of that, we'll jump right into the agenda. So today we're going to focus on when and why you would use a virtual focus group. We're going to talk a little bit about constructing the group, who should you invite. We'll go over how you can determine the questions, how you prepare your content for Skype for Business. So the whole this whole presentation is about how we use Skype for Business to do these kinds of virtual focus groups. We'll talk about conducting the focus group and then summarizing the results. So the when and why of virtual focus groups, well, there's a lot of benefits to having a virtual focus group. It allows you to dive deeper into the feedback. If you did a survey about your product or service, you would get good responses, but you couldn't ask clarification questions if they were vague. In a focus group, you have the opportunity to ask for clarification if something comes up that you need a little bit more information about. And because it's virtual, people from multiple locations can join and as if they're in the room, right? So if everyone's using the technology, we don't have a group of people in the room and a group of people on the phone. We're all using the same tools, engaging in the meeting in the same way. And because it is virtual, there's really no travel time. So now you can get your group, you can get a cross-section of your group that's spread out across geographies. Nobody has to travel. People can sit at their desk just like you are attending a webinar, and you don't have to walk across campus or get in the car and go to a different location or find a meeting room. And then finally, if you form a partnership with your customers, you can do that if you really listen and take action. If you gather feedback and take action on it, you can establish trust with your customers and keep the feedback coming. So when you might want to do a virtual focus group is when you really need to know what your users are really thinking, right? You can gain clarity on a problem. In a change initiative, you can find out why people are not adapting to the technology. If you suspect a problem with your process or system, but you're not quite sure what it is, you could use a focus group to gain clarity on the problem. And even if your system or process is running smoothly, it has been for years, it never hurts to get a quick pulse check to see how people are using the system. Are there any incremental improvements that you can do to make their lives easier? So a little bit about constructing the group. So what you want to do is it's really important to get a cross-section of members. We all know who's using our system and processes, and they give us feedback regularly. And having some of those people in your group is good because you know they're familiar with the system. But if you make your group up of just people who you know about, who are already providing you feedback, you might get your feedback might be swayed more to the positive. However, people who are using the technology, they have insight into what's working and what's not. So that's why we do want to include some known users, but we also want to try and get the unknown users. And that can be a little bit more difficult. So one of the things you can do is reach out to your client groups and ask them to volunteer people to join your group. You could reach out to your business sponsors and ask them who do they think might be a good person to provide feedback. Think about who's been vocal, and we all want to think that whatever we're doing or whatever we're responsible for, our system or process is great and nobody has any problems, but there are people who probably are struggling. They're probably talking in the hallways, by the water cooler. To try and identify those people and get their constructive criticism is really good because it'll help you improve. And then you also want to think about who's an influencer. Who do other people look to? Who's the person that gets asked all the questions? Who comes to you and says, hey, somebody asked me this question. You might want to include those people as well because they might be able to give you feedback from people who aren't attending. A general kind of feel. When it comes to determining the questions, you really need to begin with the end in mind. You have to have a goal for your focus group, right? And all of those questions should support that goal. And you can probably get through about 5 questions in an hour with a mix of open-ended and closed questions. So you want to limit those questions so that you can get through them all. So an example of an open-ended question that you might ask in a focus group, if you were doing a pulse check, for example, you might ask, give me 3 words to describe the system. And that's an example of an open-ended question. People can give whatever answer they want. You're not pushing them in a specific direction or asking specific questions. An example of a closed question would be something like a rating. How would you rate the ease of use for the following? And then maybe you would have, searching for content, browsing for content, and you might have a scale that says easy and difficult and ask people to indicate where they are on that scale. So I'm going to show you a little bit later some framework of questions so that you can, this will be a little bit more clear as we go through. So once you have your question, you're going to want to think about how you're going to prepare the content. And what you want to do is think about how you're going to make use of the virtual Skype tools. You want to plan the participant engagement, and you want to think about how you're going to analyze the results once you get them. So how you lay out the questions and the ways that people interact can make it much easier for you to analyze the results at the end. And then you're going to create a framework for the responses, and we've done that in PowerPoint, and I'll show you some of those. And you're going to prepare your meeting space. So for the purposes of this focus group and webinar, I'm going to talk about a use case where we had some existing project resources for Office 365. We moved them to a new learning portal. When we started out, we had a limited user base and we had some grassroots marketing. People who were using it were telling their friends. We were starting to get more and more subscribers into our blog and more people accessing the system. But we always knew there was going to be a phase 3 of the project where we did some sort of user experience improvements. We kind of, when we moved the stuff over, we kind of did it quick and dirty, and we wanted to improve. So for this particular focus group, our goal was really 2 things. We wanted to understand the value of our existing resources. Did the resources that we have out there, were they valuable to people? And what improvements could we make so that it would be easier for people to find the resources and use them? So next I'm going to show you some of the questions, some of the sample question framework that we used. And basically what we do is we mock these up in a PowerPoint presentation and then we upload them into the meeting. So if you look at this first question, this was one about understanding if people are using any resources, whether they were ours or anybody else's. And this is basically just a PowerPoint slide with the title at the top. some boxes that are shaded, and an area for people to have some free text responses, right? So here we have a scale. This is more of a closed question when we talk about the scale of strongly agree, agree, disagree. And this is more of an open area. And the goal of this one was to, like I said, understand if people were using any resources. And then another way that you could lay out your questions is what we wanted to understand, what people's perceptions were of our existing portal. So we showed them a picture of the portal, and then we asked them to rate these dimensions on this scale, and then give us some additional comments about the sample. So what was interesting about this is we were trying to identify what kind of usability experience we could help people with. So we did this slide multiple times with different websites that delivered learning to see what did people really identify with that would be helpful to them. And then when we started to ask questions specifically about our own learning portal, we wanted to know, did people use the portal, yes or no, and how frequently they used it, and if they weren't using it, why weren't they using the portal? And all of these questions are laid out in a framework so that people can interact with it using the annotation tools in Skype. And then finally, another way to lay out is just, here's just 3 boxes. Which are you most likely to use? And we just had people check right in here. So these are some examples of some question frameworks that you can use in a virtual focus group. So basically, all of this is in a PowerPoint presentation. It's the presentation we use to kick off the meeting, explain the tools, and then and have these sample question frameworks. So once you have the PowerPoint presentation, you save it. And then the next step is to really prepare your Skype for Business meeting space. So you're going to upload the PowerPoint file with the question framework. So there's a difference in presenting a PowerPoint file in Skype via presenting your desktop and uploading the PowerPoint file directly into Skype for Business. When you present on your desktop, people can see the slides, but they can't interact with them. The real key to the engagement here is really uploading the PowerPoint presentation into the Skype meeting and then giving people permissions to annotate. So to upload, you just basically click on the little presentation icon in your Skype meeting. You click on Select PowerPoint Files, and then you browse to your file and click Open, and it'll upload it into the Skype for Business meeting. And then once it's in your Skype for Business meeting, you're going to give people permissions to annotate the slides in Skype for Business, which will allow them to draw on them. So you're going to click on the ellipsis again in your Skype meeting window, the 3 dots in the lower right-hand corner. You go into Skype meeting options, and in that third section there where it says who can annotate PowerPoint presentations, you select everyone. And that means anybody who's in the meeting now has the ability to virtually write on your slides as you're going through. Not only the ones that you have the framework, but the others. So you might want to tell people to just limit their interaction to the questions. So now that you have your meeting space ready, you're ready to conduct the focus group. So a couple things here. You want to create a safe place for actionable feedback. So, as you're preparing, think about, are your stakeholders comfortable giving real good feedback, constructive feedback to the person who's responsible for the content or process or system or whatever it is that you're the subject of your focus group. If your culture, your corporate culture, is not like that, where people are not open to giving constructive feedback, you might want to have a third party host it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody from outside your organization. It might just be somebody who's just not directly tied to that particular initiative. And if you do that, you want to provide a mechanism for them to attend anonymously so that they'll be able to watch and see what's going on, get the feedback directly, but without having to make the people who are responding feel uncomfortable. And then as you kick off your focus group, acknowledge the reason that you need feedback. In our case, we said, this is exactly, we had a 3-phase project. We understand there's some usability improvements that can be made. We'd really like to get your feedback on them so that we can make it better for you. Explain the use of the tools. Before you jump into the content and having people interact with the slides, you want to make sure that they're comfortable with the tools first, and I'll show you a little bit about how to do that. As people are interacting with your content, you also want to acknowledge their responses and ask for clarifications. As they type something in, thank them for their responses. If you're getting a lot of check marks in a scale thing, oh, it looks like a lot of you are struggling with this particular facet. It's always good to acknowledge that and ask for clarification when you need it. And then if you can, allow your stakeholders to suggest follow-up questions. So if they're anonymous, maybe you might want to have a separate Skype for Business chat window open so that if they want to ask clarification questions, it's not right there in the chat. So now I'm going to go through how we use the Skype for Business annotation tools. And this is actually a slide right from our deck that we used that describes the tools. So first, when you've given people permissions to annotate on your slides, they'll see this little pencil icon in the upper right-hand corner of all the slides in the presentation. And if they click on that, it's going to drop down this annotation toolbar. And then we call out the tools that we want people to use. We tell people you're going to be presented with a group of slides. You'll have the ability to interact with them. There's going to be some cases where we're going to ask you to check something, add a stamp to the slides, and there'll be other cases when we're going to ask you to add text. So when you want to add a stamp, you just click on the stamp tool. If you want to change your stamp, you can click on the drop down next to it to give either an arrow or an X and change your stamp tool. For people to add text, they just click on the text tool, click directly on the slide and begin typing, and you'll see the text come in real time. And if people want different options for their text, if they want to make the font smaller, if they want to change the color, they can also do that through the drop-down tool. So when I'm on this slide in the focus group, I just tell people add stamps and start adding comments and check other people's comments and get used to using the tools. So this is kind of how it all works in action. You ask the question, and this is from our showing the samples and what we think how people feel about this particular thing. You introduce the question and you just say, check in where you feel you are along this scale, and if you have any other additional comments, go ahead and add them. And as you're going through, people will be checking and they'll start adding content into the slides, and you'll start to see some of their comments and text. What you won't see is who put the text in. So this is anonymous, so that's great. And then if something comes up that you need a clarification question on, like something like this, I feel like more key content could be surfaced on the landing page, you might want to ask a follow-up question about that, such as, what do you think is key content? If people feel comfortable, they can put it in the chat in the Skype meeting, or they can just put it directly on this page, or they can just speak it however you feel it should go through. It should work in that particular focus group based on your culture and how comfortable people are providing feedback. So we've done this on a number of slides, and we're done with our focus group, and now we're getting ready to summarize our results. So the great thing about the Skype for Business and using this and the annotated content is it's very easy to just export it. You'll get a screenshot of everything that has been put on those kind of virtual whiteboards, and then you'll be able to just include screen grabs in your report out and then write some summaries around it. It's really easy. You just click on the little monitor icon like you were present content. You click on manage content, and then you click on the ellipsis in the second image here. You'll see the ellipsis, and then you just save that file with annotations. It exports it as an XPS file, which is kind of Microsoft's version of a PDF file. And then, like I said, you can just grab those screen grabs and put them in a PowerPoint presentation and just create some summaries and boxes around that. And that's pretty much the virtual focus group in a nutshell. So at this point, I'd like to open it up to questions. Billy, if we have any in the chat?
Yes, we have. Can you hear me, Kristen?
Yes.
Perfect. So the first question we received was, you showed us how to use the annotation tools in Skype. When have you used the other tools such as whiteboards and polls?
Oh, good. Good question. So we do a couple of user forums, and we typically open up our user forums with polls. And sometimes, depending on what the forum is, we'll do it to focus on what our current environment is. Like, so for example, when we implemented the modern document library, Microsoft had made some changes and gave us a Microsoft document library. In one of our user forums, our opening poll would be something like, well, how would you rate your understanding of the new document library? And then we'd give people questions, answers like, I got it, I need some practice, I'm struggling, or what's the modern document library view? And this is a great way to get people's level of understanding before you dive deeper into a topic. So what that tells us in the beginning of a meeting is, what do we need to focus on about this particular change that will help people adapt to it better? Whiteboards at our Pharmica consultants meeting, we use them all the time. We open our meeting with a whiteboard. It's usually some sort of icebreaker. You could throw up pictures of license plates and have people try to guess what they mean. You could ask people questions about what their plans are for vacation. There was in one of our meetings at a client, we had somebody who recently went out on paternity leave, and we popped up he was unable to attend the meeting, so we popped up a whiteboard and had everybody type their congratulations and then send them to him, and it was really great because it made him feel great that people were thinking of him as he was out. Also, you can use whiteboards for brainstorming. They're just really easy to pop up through those and that presentable content. Again, you click on that little monitor icon, and in this case, you're going to choose other content and whiteboard, and it's just a blank slate, and you can ask a question and just let people brainstorm away by typing on it. So that's some of the cases where we have used those other tools.
All right, great. The next question we've received is, how do you know what specific questions to ask? Is there a list of potential questions out there?
So the questions are kind of it's kind of difficult to know exactly what questions to ask. My advice would be Google focus group questions, get a list of questions together, and then really pare them down. Make sure they all support the goal of your focus group. You'll find you want to ask a lot of questions, and then you're really going to have to pare them down. So if you know somebody in your organization, for example, who's good at surveys, you might want to ask them to help you out. Again, just make sure like everything supports the goal. At Pharmica, we've done them. It doesn't take that long, probably a couple hours to do, to put together questions, frameworks, all that kind of stuff. So if you're really struggling, you can always contact us and we can help you out.
All right, this is the last question we received. If we don't get any more after this, we're going to wrap it up. This question is, you said that if a third-party host that the team could join anonymously, how do they do that? How do you communicate with them?
Right. So in Skype for Business, you'll notice in your calendar invitations, there's that link that says Join Skype Meeting. In some instances, you might see the one that says Join via the web. When somebody joins through the web app, there is a box that asks for your name. It keeps the default value that you've had in there from before, but you can always change it. So if I wanted to join a meeting, for example, anonymously, I could type any name in there. I could be Billy D, for example. Nobody has to know it's Kristen. And then to get to that, if you don't know how to get to the Skype web app, basically what you do is you just right-click on the hyperlink in the calendar invitation, you copy that, and at the end of that URL, you put a question mark and then SL like system language, equals 1. That's how I remember what it is. And when you do that and then go directly to that URL, it'll force you into the web app where you can type your own name. And as far as anonymous questions, yeah, I use a dual monitor, so I'll keep the Skype window open on one monitor while I'm presenting on the other so that I can see like that individual conversation from my stakeholders on the additional questions, clarification questions that they would want to ask.
Okay, and we actually did receive another question here. What if you forget to capture the annotation exercise? Is there somehow a way to get it back?
So if you forget to do that, you can always do screenshots throughout the presentation, right? So as people are typing and you're done on it, a keyboard shortcut would be the Windows key and S, and you can just click and drag and grab a screenshot, paste it into a OneNote page if you're worried about that. After the meeting, you can export those annotations, but you have to be careful because you only have, after the meeting, the content sometimes goes away. I think it depends on your settings. We do it right after the meeting. I schedule some time after, like for 15 minutes after, to clean up, make sure I've gotten all my annotations, all that kind of stuff. You can always go back to manage presentable content, choose your whiteboards, your polls, and grab those kinds of screenshots. But you have to be careful that you schedule some time after the meeting to do that so that you don't lose it.
Okay, great. And you could also, you could always record your meeting as well using Skype for Business.
That's true.
Skype for Business allows you to record entire meetings, and then you can go back and review after the fact. And if there's nothing you need to save from it, you can always delete. So I think those are all the questions that we have received today. I want to thank everyone for taking time out of their day to join us. We're going to go ahead and post this webinar on the Pharmica website as we've been recording it. I'll send an email notifying everyone when it's up. So if you enjoyed the content and want to view it again, or maybe share it with someone who you think may also benefit from seeing the content, please do so. If anyone's interested in learning more about Pharmica or the work we do with these focus groups, reach out. You can reach out to myself or Kristen. You all have my contact information, and you can check out pharmicaconsulting.com. And we're hosting webinars monthly, so please go and check out what we have upcoming next and see if you'd like to register. So with that, I'll close it off for today. So again, thank you all for joining, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Billy. Goodbye, everyone.